Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I am your host, Amanda Quick, and today I am so excited to introduce Lucy. She is a coach for women and mothers, and her work and passion lies in helping moms to thrive in body and mind and not just survive. She is highly experienced in pre- and postnatal exercise routines, a yoga teacher, matrescence activist, educator, and mom herself. Welcome so much, Lucy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. You have quite a story yourself. You know, when we chatted earlier on, there was so much that resonated and similarities in my own journey. And I felt like we were kindred spirits. So I'm really excited to dig in and share more about, where you have been and how you have came to be. If there's anything else you want to share with people as we get started, and then we'll just hop right in and start sharing your story.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate what you've said. I know that I have been through a lot and I have quite a story to share, and I'm excited to share it with you and where our conversation goes. And I like to share it in different ways when it's appropriate to, because I believe it can obviously help others to learn where I was, where I've come from, how I've really transformed, and where that has brought me today.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah. So why don't we go ahead and dig in so your story starts really almost even before you actually met your child, right? Before you became a mom even. And, you want to tell us, what was life like back then? Who were you?
Yeah. So before I had Matilda, I was a fitness professional. I'd relocated from London to a seaside city and set up my business again, and had really enjoyed working at posh gyms in central London and living that life. But it was great to set up my own business and move away. And I just love supporting mums, and I loved it before I became a mum, but of course it became even more juicy and fulfilling once I'd been through pregnancy and birth myself. And I was so looking forward to birth and so looking forward to becoming a mum. And really, I suppose my transformation begins when I had a traumatic birth experience having Matilda. But it was so fucking crazy, like, to the first swear word of many, to be literally like really connected with my body as a yoga teacher and things, to have hoped for. And I understand that birth doesn't obviously always go the way we hope, but to sort of hope for a home birth. But it ended up as 5 days in labor, an emergency C-section. That C-section also, I had complications, so they cut my bladder by mistake during the C-section, and that led to having a catheter for a month and having a womb infection and having panic attacks a couple of weeks after leaving hospital as well. So it was incredibly fucking intense and absolutely not the way that I expected birth to go or motherhood to start, with this bag attached to my leg and feeling so sore and really traumatized.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of, people can relate this, they tell you in all of the birth
masses that, your birth plan is just a guide. It doesn't actually go that way. And yet we still really have this expectation, right? We have
Yeah.
this expectation. We have this definition of who we are. And so therefore it makes sense, right? You had this, I'm a yoga teacher. I'm fit. I understand. I'm connected. So it's going to be no problem,
Yeah.
right? I'm no stranger to pain, all the things, right? And I deeply relate because I believed all the same thing. I wasn't a yoga teacher, but I had all the same beliefs. And
Right. Yeah.
my first child also was born via C-section. I didn't have 5 days and all the same complications, but I have some understanding at least of feeling like I missed out and I was disappointed in myself, even
Yes.
though
Yes.
it really wasn't my fault, but I
Yeah.
certainly blamed myself. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And
But
there's
yeah.
just this identity crisis that hits
Mm.
you.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I really, really hear you. And I love that you've brought that up because I exactly felt that my body had failed me. And I've written many, many poems in the last decade, because my daughter turns 10 on Saturday. Motherhood, I've found, has helped me to really create and write, which I'm sure is no surprise to you. But it's so I've written a poem about how I learned to accept that my body didn't fail me. And I'm sorry that I even ever thought that. But I think
Mhm.
some of it's conditioning, some of it's societal pressures. And I have to say, as a pre and postnatal specialist, unfortunately, there is still a load of bullshit around the kind of hierarchy of what type of birth you have. And it's just so fucking wrong because so many women come away from birth having done their fucking best, of course. But do you know what? I feel like Mother Nature handed me that birth experience because it's made me who I am today, as well as the other things, which I'm sure we'll go into. But
Yep.
yeah, it really has. And also, I don't know if you found this, but I learned a lot when I heard that Matilda was part of the birth experience. And and she doesn't really go along with plans in general very easily. So I'm like, oh, no shit. No shit. That was
Well,
how
and
she
it's
came into
funny
the
you
world.
mentioned that because I have 3 children and their birth experiences was all vastly different. And
Mm.
if I look back, I can absolutely see their personality in each of my birth
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
And they're polar opposites, all 3 of them. And so I had one who I had I literally got up in the morning, my water broke, and it was 10 days early. He was, sunny side up, and it ended up in C-section. And he's my autistic kid that doesn't like change, doesn't like to do anything, doesn't like to move,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Very intellectual, and so it's like, okay, and then all the way to the other spectrum, my last child was a home birth, super fast, came out in one push, and that kid has not stopped moving. He just keeps going.
Wow.
We're doing it. We're
Wow.
going. And, and then my middle one was a home birth, but it was much more challenging. It was much more emotional. It was healing in a sense, but wasn't the picture I had in my head of what it should be. And
Mm.
he's my emotional child, and he has different challenges, and he needs lots more emotional comfort in a different way. And so it's
Mm.
I love that lens because I think it also realizes it's a co-creation, right? It's not
Yeah.
just about
Yes.
us. We're this
Yes.
vessel, we're this portal, but it's a
Yes.
co-creation of the experience that our child is having that we have the honor of being a part of.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So you became a mom in a somewhat traumatic way. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously there was some healing from that because now you've got all of the postpartum situation on top of
Mm.
recovering,
Yeah.
right? So early
Yeah.
momhood wasn't what you expected it to be either.
No. No. It was so fucking hard. And I think it's really beautiful being 10 years in and working in motherhood as I do. I reflect with so much grace and so much love for myself back then. And I sometimes, maybe when I'm feeling tender, and I'm so open to this, I know that you won't judge me, but depending on who listens to this, I feel like saying I sometimes still grieve the birth experience I didn't have.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like I say, I'm not going to judge myself over that. And it's just gorgeous to really go through all the things. Because to be honest, that's what I'm doing this very week because Matilda was born this coming Saturday 10 years ago, but I went into labor Sunday just gone.
Mm,
So it was a week long
mhm,
process. And so I really,
mhm,
try and honor my body. But yeah, it was incredibly tough having the tender C-section scar, the catheter, and all of that, and then the discovering the womb infection, going to the doctors, being totally grossed out by that and coming to terms with that, and then the panic attacks, and then I had to go to the hospital to make sure that my bladder worked of its own accord a month after having Matilda. And I've shared this on another podcast, but how I really only began to fall in love with my daughter when the catheter was removed, because before that I was just fucking worried about my health.
yeah,
It was so upsetting to have all these things happen. And yeah, I can really picture like being in that little room, having to drink loads and then go for a wee and make sure it was working, and then leaving and being like, oh, some freedom. And now my motherhood can begin.
mhm,
And it was still tremendously hard due to the pressures I had at home. Yeah. And ever since really having Tilly, I have wanted to have another go. Not just birth, but I think I've let go of that. I don't necessarily need to have another go at birth, but I would love to be able to relive early parenthood with
mhm,
a supportive
mhm.
partner.
Yeah. Well,
Because
and
I think, yeah,
on top of everything, right? You're recovering, you've got a newborn,
yeah,
and so you're completely dependent on somebody else. And it sounds like that wasn't, it wasn't a good relationship. And so that dependency, I'm guessing, got aggravated even more so
mm,
because everything was escalated, right? A new stressor was added to an already
hmm,
stressful relationship.
yeah, yeah, and I feel really grateful that breastfeeding came easily, and obviously some people don't find that easy, and I'm so grateful that it was joyous and easeful, and yeah, but before I had Matilda, the relationship wasn't a problem, but I feel like Matilda was my messenger, A, with the birth experience, and B, illuminating the shit that was going on with her dad. Um,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and so yeah, it was tremendously difficult to not feel seen and supported, to be blamed, to not be giving the loving kindness. And I actually feel quite choked and emotional about it now, because I just like in my advocacy for women and mothers, I genuinely believe it's fucking criminal, and obviously like not going to jail kind of shit, but it is criminal to not support a new mum in that vulnerable stage,
Yeah,
whether it's a vaginal birth, whether it's C-section, in that fragile part of her life. It's just fucking
yeah,
wrong to be
yeah.
bombarded by pressures and shoulds and shopping list shit. And has this been done? I need to sit here and stare at my baby and just take some breaths. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And I need to not have anybody bombarding me and wanting to hold the baby and
Yeah.
insert themselves.
Yeah.
And I fully agree with you. Society does not support moms.
Mm.
In financially, it does not, and I'm in the US where we don't got anything.
Yeah.
And we're then,
Yes.
bombarded with hospital bills with the birth that we didn't want. Right. So there's just this
Yeah.
like layer upon layer of,
Yeah.
and my ex-husband, my father of my kids, he'd stayed home for a week, but and he did better in the newborn time, but it also highlighted the challenges because my new focus was my baby. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore I was no
Mm-hmm.
longer focusing on him. And so
Yeah.
that aggravated his mental health and the challenges. And I
Mm.
didn't know, but that's what then sent him back off of his deep end, was because he no longer had me focusing on him and his personality disorders took off. But that's not
I
even, I
see.
don't think my story is unique there because my mom had the same. She tells me to, and she's now passed, but says that I was the one that was the messenger for her marriage because everything
Wow.
that was okay in her marriage before, it was okay for her, but it was no longer okay for me. And so
Mm.
it forced her to stand up for herself, to stand up for me, because, we have these stories in our head of what we're willing to accept when it's just
Yeah.
us. And now we've
Yeah.
got this newborn baby and this activation that takes place,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden that's not okay.
No. Yeah, for sure. And it took me a long time to leave and now I think back, and I'm really big in my coaching and in my classes, I'm really big on helping people to connect with their body, to listen to their instincts and their intuition. And I remember now that, like, I so wanted to leave 3 years earlier, or 2
Mhm.
years earlier, in fact. It took me a long time because I don't think we're brought up to trust, like, the little whispers that our body is saying. But I left for 2 reasons, of course, for my own safety and enjoyment of a relationship and myself and the freedom, because I felt so fucking caged, but also so that my daughter doesn't have unhealthy relationships as a result of seeing me shouted at and
Right.
controlled. It's just not okay, and it feels really powerful to have done what I did, and yeah, I'm really fucking proud of myself. It's been hard and
You
is
should be.
sometimes.
It
Yeah, thank
it
you.
is impossible. It is I think everybody who has left wishes they did it sooner. Like,
Yeah,
everybody.
really.
Nobody we don't
Mm,
we just don't operate because we wouldn't honestly, if we listened to ourselves and those little whispers, we probably wouldn't be in the situation in the first place. And
true.
so
Yeah.
we're right? We're
Yeah.
not conditioned to listen. And so when
Yes.
the whispers have to turn into shouts sometimes.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we're like, okay, fine, but it's going to be hard. And then we, you know, make it into a bigger deal than it maybe is. Sometimes it is fucking hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is humongous. Was there like a catalyst event or a moment where you said, I'm done?
Yes, there was, and I feel like it's perhaps necessary for me to add that, like, I did care and I did try, and I did care a bit like what you've said. When a guy becomes a father, everything is so new, and I care for how that transition affected him, but I couldn't stay for the shit that was happening, and I realized, probably more in hindsight, but also just going, "Oh my gosh, yeah, this is emotional abuse. This is controlling." Like, how serious it was. And yeah, I don't know about you, but I just almost had to reality check, because I never imagined that that could happen to me. As we don't,
Hmm.
I never imagined that I'd be divorced, all of that. But sorry, to answer your question, there was a point where, yeah, I said, I'm I'm done, I'm leaving, and I began to look for alternative accommodation. And what what I find interesting is that he didn't give me outright permission. He didn't really take it, and that's no surprise now I know a bit more about the character. Like, okay. And it wasn't like, "I'm really sorry, is there anything I can do better?" It was just like, "Okay." And yeah, and the thing is, I know now, with really good boundaries and being really assertive and an advocate for myself, that I have a right to step away. But I was waiting for permission from him. I was waiting for my
Hmm.
family to say,
Hmm.
"Luce, you're not happy. You've really
It's
changed,"
okay
that
to
kind of
leave.
thing.
You needed
That's it.
somebody to tell you it's okay to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I could go back and do it again, I'd be like, "No, these are the signs, you can go now."
Mhm. Right. The message actually was coming from yourself, right? It was
Yeah.
the you were trying to give yourself permission the whole time. You
Yes.
just didn't hear it.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't really care how this comes across. And I've worked through certain elements of shame over the last few years, but I've shared on my own podcast my entire story about what happened. But I actually came up with different. Let me think of how to explain this. Because of his difficulty letting go of me, and obviously that shows control, the control that was
Mhm.
happening, I then went about finding someone else who could help me escape the relationship. And, like, yes, there was an element of shame. I've let go of that now. But, like, I felt like I needed a story to say, I've met someone else at this office job that I had,
Mm.
for him to fucking realize that I was unhappy.
You were still looking for permission.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I realize I've read a bit of Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs, and I realize why people can go into all these, I don't know if convoluted is the word, ways to get rid of someone who doesn't let you go. But I now see that
Yes.
it's their grip on you. And I know from your
Yeah.
TED talk, like, you can understand why I didn't leave sooner.
I 100% can. And what's not in my talk, but is in my book, is I too had a relationship in between.
Right.
because I I didn't have a way out. I didn't know how to get
Yes.
out. I had so many stories about I have to stay. I have to keep the kids together. I have to.
Yeah.
And, I had 3 boys and I
Mm.
had gone back to work, but I felt completely it was going to be on me to break my family apart if I made the decision to leave. And this is after
Yeah.
my ex-husband's been arrested and all these things. And
Shit.
still
Yeah.
it was my fault. And so I didn't understand it at the time either, but I started being very attracted to a coworker and I started feeling this magnetic pull towards somebody
Yes.
else.
Yeah.
And I know now that I was manifesting that level of intensity because it was the only damn thing that was going to get me out because
Oh
I
my gosh,
couldn't
that's
ignore it.
amazing. Wow. Because what do you
Yeah.
say that you couldn't ignore it?
I couldn't ignore the intensity of this feeling towards, and I was working with him, right? So it's like I
Mm.
had to see him every day, and my mind is playing stories in my head. I was fantasizing, and
Mm-hmm.
then I would go home and I would have to pretend to be happy in my marriage. And
Yep.
it's like, it was literally I was breaking. And,
Yes.
and I feel like so often we have something, we're seeking something that's going to pull us out of this
Yes.
situation, and we're
Yes.
seeking this other person, this whatever the thing is that's going to be that. And you know thankfully he ended up not being abusive, but it was a challenging relationship because
Mm.
I was working together. And when I told my ex-husband that I was interested in this other person because I knew what it was like to be cheated on and I wasn't going to do this in secret. So I actually refused to do it as an affair. He said, "Okay, you go do what you want to do. I'm staying." And he refused to leave. It didn't even work. He didn't want to move out because he wanted to keep that grip on me.
Mm.
And so, my story continues, but, for you, you know, you found somebody else that at the time felt like an escape, felt like permission, felt like another
Mm.
story of how you could get out of your marriage.
Yeah, and I love that's so even more validating, because I've gone through what's happened and take ownership of what I did, if people want to say that, over the last few years in different cycles of healing and things like that. But fucking hell, that's so amazing to hear what you said. And I'm not surprised. I am totally, and even before I had an affair, because I had an affair. Even before that, I remember saying to a friend, I can totally see why affairs happen now. And the
Mhm.
thing is, maybe very much like you, I wanted, and I'll talk more about the affair in a moment, I wanted my marriage to work. I was talking to this friend, and this friend turned out to prey on me, which we'll go more into. But like, I thought I could just be heard and seen and tell him about my
Yes.
marriage problems and then go back and fix things. But it was still hard and still horrendous and still all the things controlling, abusive, blah, blah, blah. Um, so, and I know that can make me sound like a floozy, and I know it feels like women aren't allowed to enjoy sex or to be enjoyed or adored or whatever. But I take ownership of all the fucking things that I needed. It wasn't just sex, it was to be seen, to be
Yeah.
listened to not be grumped at the end of a day, and for someone to willingly help out with our child, you know.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so I was going to this friend who I'd known for over a decade, meeting up, chatting, and then it turned to meeting up, having sex, and just like feeling fucking alive again. And yeah,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
feels
No,
so
I
great.
100% relate. And
Yeah.
I mean, all humans, regardless, male, female, moms or not, we all need to be seen. We all need to be heard. We all need to be understood. We all need to be loved. And if we've
Yeah.
had a relationship where those things did not exist
Mhm. Mhm.
and we find them, I'm sorry, but there is no shame in that. Like, yes,
Yeah.
obviously, we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with our partners, 100%. But there is
Mm.
no shame in even that, because I think the other thing that's really fascinating about your story is you jumped from one abusive situation to another, but it wasn't all bad,
No.
right? And so when you're unraveling this affair that ends up being, not what you really expected it to be, you also can't negate the positives in actually feeling seen for a moment
Yeah.
and actually
Yeah.
feeling alive and loved and pleasured
Yeah.
in that moment, because
Mm-hmm.
it's intense. It's
Yeah.
magnetic. It's like the best thing ever in those moments. And when you've been through an experience where you've been shut down and not
Mm.
allowed to be yourself, and everything about your world is decided for you, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden somebody gives a fuck about you,
Yeah.
it is the most intoxicating, amazing feeling. I am so grateful that I got that experience because it helped me find me again. Like, I like
Yes.
having fun.
Yes.
I like doing things, and I like using my brain in other ways, and I like having conversations that are not just about children, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And that's something to celebrate. And that's something to
Totally.
honor in ourselves as women, that we fucking deserve those things too, no matter if
Yeah.
we're moms or not.
Yes. Oh, you're speaking my language. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And yeah, I mean, that's what I'm about. I love um, to just be openly me now and to help women give themselves permission to be who
Yeah.
they are. It doesn't matter if they swear, it doesn't matter if they like to talk about like self pleasure or wearing something really sexy, all these things. Like, it's times gone by where they would have been shameful. And I think it obviously takes generations and years for things to change and people to feel comfortable, and it's each person's own journey. But I think, in case it's helpful to share, what I really loved about the unraveling of the last few years was I found that I healed even more over my birth trauma when I left my husband, because my birth trauma was never given space in that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
huge to realize that that was happening. And I was like, wow, I've just had another massive release, and AKA cry, and it's been gorgeous to really
Of course.
land with it. Yeah.
I feel like each layer of healing gives you another awareness of the previous layer in a different way,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
you look at this healing from your marriage and you realize this next piece also goes back to your birth trauma. And like
yeah.
for me, every time I have a piece, it goes back to the even further. There's my like teenage years and there's my
Yeah.
childhood stuff, and I get new awarenesses and expanded understandings of each layer, each step I take.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's really gorgeous, and I think maybe early on in my healing and growth journey, self-development stuff, I would be like, "Really? Another layer?" But now I'm like, "Oh my god, I love the wisdom. I love the stuff that's coming up."
Right. Well, and there's so much beauty to be found when we
Mm,
start being willing to look at it, right? You didn't get the birth you wanted. You didn't have the marriage you wanted. You didn't even have the new relationship you wanted. And yet
mm.
the wisdom that you've gained from it and the understandings that you've had from it have created this person with the ability to have that understanding.
Yeah.
And that's this like gift piece, this like I almost sit in awe of the creations that we have sometimes,
Yes.
because as
Yeah.
much as they suck in the moment,
Mhm.
without it, we would not have this beautiful understanding and awareness and ability to see a wider
Mm.
perspective. And so,
Mhm.
for you, do you want to, I don't know if you want to talk more about that relationship then turned, negative and wasn't actually what you thought it was. And it allowed you to come out of your marriage, but then it
Yeah.
added in a whole nother piece for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just to touch on what you've said there, it's hard in the moment. Yeah, and I remember feeling so shit about my marriage that I just said to a friend, like, it's separation or suicide. I can't fucking handle this. And this is again where I give myself so much grace for having an affair, because if I was drowning in a river and a log floated by, I would catch on to that. And that just happened to be this guy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, to go into that, like, it was so nice to feel seen and to have chats, endless, yeah, just talking about the problems that I had, and he honestly wanted, it seemed, to help. I mean, I don't know what I can trust now, and that will make more sense obviously as I go into the story, but like, it seemed like he wanted to help, and he was like, "Oh, but having a child really puts stress on a relationship. You might work through it," that kind of thing. And then as I say, we began to meet and sleep together, not very often, but it was just something that I looked forward to because I felt so
Mhm.
alive. And
Mhm.
I will say it time and time again. I never imagined that I would have an affair. I am a hopeless/hopeful romantic, and I never predicted that that kind of shit could happen. I could also never have predicted that that guy that I had an affair with would assault me, would sexually abuse me. And this is where it's just like so fucking staggering to think of what happened. Like sometimes I'm like, is that really my story? Yeah. So I went from one abusive partner to another, and he was so monstrous and controlling. But it took its time. It was like the kind of, I think people talk about a boiling frog, it's gradual. You don't notice straight
Yes.
away. But
Yes.
I I
And it makes no sense because it's not the person that you've created in your mind. And so the
mm,
cognitive dissonance is intense.
yeah, yeah. But there were some very scary times, and I genuinely feel grateful to be alive. I had to get the police involved. There were episodes where we were in the dark in a park together, and he was being really fucking menacing. And that was probably the beginning of me going, "This is like literally like the Joker kind of shit, like really, really messed up." And I thought I could maybe run out onto the street here and call for help, but that night, we carried on walking through the park, but I think the first blazing red flag was waving it in my head. And then I called the police when he was out of the country. And I remember saying to them, I don't feel safe in my home when he's in the country because he would knock unannounced. He'd come from a different city and he would just come unannounced. And it was just so horrible. And he would shout, and this it won't be surprising to people who know a narcissistic personality, but he got me to work for him. So there was that double control,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
personal side, and then employing me, and so it was just a total shit show, and it was great to have the police involved, and that's where I really realized that I needed to stop things, and I remember the policeman saying, you can't really say to him, "Leave me alone, or I'll contact the police," until you've cut ties from a professional perspective. And so I and and I got very, very, very ill, the most unwell I've ever been in my life, and that was sure as hell my body slamming on the brakes saying, "You are really in a dangerous situation here. You have to rest." I had a huge fever, was in bed for a week. I couldn't see my daughter, and I remember being really, really weak. I've written a poem again about this, the experience of feeling like I could walk again and open my eyes again. And when I saw Tilly after a week, I fell to my knees in the playground and cried because I was so grateful to see her again. Um, just such intense stuff, and that is what absolutely wrought havoc on my nervous system, on my gut health. My skin, you may see, is still fucking healing from all the shit that happened back then. And Christ, am I proud of myself? Phoenix Rising kind of styly and Shield Maiden all righty. I've got a Shield Maiden t-shirt on.
I
But
love it.
but but yeah, it was just so monstrous. And so like I say, and it does sometimes shock me to still acknowledge that this guy who I had known and trusted decided, or I don't know, decided, who knows, um, to hit me and to rape me.
Yeah. And that's one of the most challenging things to come to terms with, right?
Yeah.
We put our trust in somebody. We believe who they are. We believe who we are with them. And so we have
Yes.
so much wrapped around, right? The person we become in this relationship is the identity that we are holding, and we're
Mm,
attached to that. And then all
mm,
of a sudden, something literally comes out of nowhere and, in your case, literally smacks you, and in my case, it certainly felt that way. And yet
mm.
part of us goes, wait, did that actually happen? I don't even know if I believe
Yeah.
it, that it happened. Well, even while it's happening, we're,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
in such a state of, this isn't who I know. This isn't myself. This isn't. And people sit there and we are judging ourselves while we feel like the rest of the world is looking, going, what are you doing? And yet
Mhm.
they're not in this situation and they can't
Yeah.
understand the person we've become in this relationship that has now all of a sudden trying to be shocked awake. It's not
Mm.
an instant, oh, you did a bad thing. Now I'm leaving. Like, it doesn't work like that.
No. Yeah, yeah. And that's what's so fascinating about it, because it was sort of, on and off with regards to not the relationship. I wouldn't say we officially got back together, but I finished it with him on November, I think it's 19th anyway, it's the date of the poem that I've written. And after that, he was kind of taunting me and making out that I'd have nothing if I didn't work for him. So I continued to work for him, definitely having boundaries and having a distance,
Mm.
because he was trying to push my buttons and talking about other women and that kind of thing. And I was like, I don't care. So yeah, and then I just realized I had to just cut everything, and so eventually blocked him and said, "If you contact me, I'll call the police." Um, and have thankfully had no contact whatsoever for the last few years. And then, as I kind of touched on before, the different cycles of healing happened. Of kind of, why did I let myself go through that? But I realized through different things from my past, not knowing better, not knowing that I deserved better. It's been a phenomenal journey, and I now don't, needless to say, potentially, I don't put up with shit. And I am such an advocate for myself and other people's desires, if they'll let me. I won't step in unless
Mhm.
asked. But like, we have to realize that we deserve to be treated with reverence and respect and love.
Yeah. And you get to model that for your daughter,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's, I think for all of us as moms, that it all boils down. Our kids are our why. Like, we
yeah.
have big purposes, but at the end of the
Mm,
day, they remind us every damn time why we are doing what we're doing and why we've gone through what we've gone through, and the people
yeah,
that they get to become and the parents that we get to be for
yeah,
them because of it.
yeah.
Because so many times, people stay for whatever the reasons, and then they pass that generational trauma down and it
Mm-hmm.
gets repeated. And
Mm,
and that's what we wait a minute. I don't I don't want this for them. I don't want this to be the model of a relationship. I don't want it to be, and you especially, you had, a daughter. And so I don't want her to know this is how people treat.
yeah.
This is what love is. Like, none of that is
Yes.
okay.
No, absolutely. And I'm so deeply grateful for my boyfriend. We've been together a few years now, and he is, and I feel we are together, just such a gorgeous example of care and
Hmm.
n- like, I don't think we've ever raised our voices at one another, like with Tilly there or not. Like, such a gorgeous example.
When we never have that experience as daughters ourselves, and we
Hmm.
never, society doesn't portray this. Society portrays that men protect and provide, right? That's this masculine bullshit that's
Yeah.
paraded around.
Yeah.
And so even independent, strong women get sucked into this, especially when we
Mm,
become mothers and we are dependent. I don't want this to be the model of a relationship. I don't want it to be, and you especially, you had, a daughter. And so I don't want her to know this is how people treat.
yeah.
This is what love is. Like, none of that is
Yes.
okay. And we do require support. We get
Yeah.
sucked into this archetype of
Yeah.
this person that we aren't. And yet
Yes.
it gets deepened over time and become more and more dependent. And so it's it's like we not only have to unlearn what society has programmed, we have to come out of the relationship. We have to find ourselves again. And then
Yeah.
we have to deprogram our childhood and all. It's like this, there are layers. It is a lot.
So many layers. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But on the other end of it, we get to be these fierce, awakened mothers that
Mm.
get to raise kids in a entirely new way.
Mhm.
Right? So your relationship with your daughter, I'm assuming, is very different than, your relationship was with your parents, and very different than even was before.
Yeah. Yeah. I am so grateful doesn't really touch on it. Yeah, I really treasure my relationship with Matilda. It's incredibly precious, and I think it can be very hard because me and her dad parallel parent, and that's challenging for her, having the different home settings and parenting styles and things like that. But, playing I don't know if playing the long game kind of covers it really, but I know that any wobbly that we have and any turmoil that I feel is just like another layer of the healing and the growth.
Mhm.
And I'm so fucking open to crying and all the emotions. And of course there are lots of healing modalities, and I have wonderful witchy friends that I can book in with, whether it's for Reiki or talking. But yeah, my relationship with my mum is strong, and I feel like I had a great relationship with my family and close. Different difficulties happened when I left my husband, which I won't go into, but I I love that I have done what I've done and I've stayed true
Mhm.
to myself over the last 5
Mhm.
years because it's just been obviously like so unsteadying. I left the marital home. I set up anew, and that was just so hard. So to hold space for Matilda and all her different things, she didn't like the home, blah, blah, blah. All of that was just so hard for me doing my best. Bless her. So yeah, I'm just, in awe of who we've both become now. And I think particularly maybe because it's her 10th birthday coming up, I'm feeling particularly reminiscent, but it's been a very hard but very powerful journey the last 10 years and the last 5 years since I left.
Yeah. Well, and I'm totally right there with you. My oldest is now 14, so
Mm.
freezy making. He's starting high school. Holy cow. Um, not cannot believe.
Yeah.
But looking back and the mom I was, there was always this piece of deep connection to my children. There was always this intuition, at least for me, when it came to them. But
Mhm, mhm.
the ability to now expand that instead of just knowing what they need, it's now
Mm.
like holding the bigger container and making sure that I'm included because I'm actually the one to facilitate that.
Yeah.
And, in my journey, it was one of the biggest lessons for me was I had this belief that my kids had to be okay first and that would make me okay. But it's
Mhm,
backwards.
mhm.
I had to learn how to take care of me so I could support them.
Yeah.
And I need to be the mom that I can be by taking care of me so they can be all of those things. And that actually heightens my connection and heightens my intuition and heightens my
Yes.
ability to be the mom they need.
Yes. Oh, I totally agree. Totally agree. And I think that's what I practice and that's what I teach. And I
Mhm.
think even though we might have small amounts of guilt, even like the tiniest amount, now, um, I know that what I go out and do, and when I leave her with my mum, say I'm thinking for the burlesque course that I did a couple of months ago, I just knew that I had to go to pursue something that was creative and fulfilling for me. And also,
Yeah,
it sets the example for her to know that she can do that. Yes, I'm aware of her
exactly.
desires and her needs, but I also
Yes.
deserve that.
Exactly. Exactly. And they both,
Yeah.
right? They both matter.
Yeah.
And, when they're babies, obviously it's a little different with infants than a 10, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we get to grow and learn and work and co-create together. And I think that's,
Mhm.
to me, being the mom that I am now, being the person I am now, being able to help and be able to use my experiences and see others in a different way. Gratitude isn't big enough for those
Yeah.
for those
Yeah.
feelings.
Mm.
I actually saw, I was scrolling Facebook and I saw this meme, that the hard times I'm grateful because they make me stronger. And I responded and I said, it's not even about strength. Like I'm strong before. I've always like
Mm.
it's not that I need more strength. But what the hard times did is they gave me compassion. And they gave me compassion and understanding for people that I didn't understand before. And they gave me compassion
Mhm.
for situations that I didn't understand before. And that
Yeah.
is something that I can really hold gratitude for. And I feel like the same is true for you,
Yeah.
right? You had this, we go back
Yeah.
to the beginning. You had this belief about who you were, what birth was going
Mm.
to be, what motherhood was going to be, what marriage was going to
Mm.
be, what all these things.
Mhm.
And every step of the way, you had a big old reality check. Every
Yeah.
step of the way that's
Yeah.
not how it is for everybody.
Yes, totally. And yeah, it does give me so much compassion. And I love how I'm able to converse with people and they can tell that I'm really, really listening. And I think that means so much, especially to a mum, right? But also if someone's just slightly fragile and they haven't really felt like leaving the house, but they have, and it's a big deal, that, for example, I just fucking get it because, like, that's how I felt when Tilly was born. I didn't really want to go out much because she was puking a lot and I was just so fucking fragile. And whether I relate or not, I feel like I just have such an understanding of the different
Mhm.
complexities to being human and the different fragile ways that we struggle. And
Yeah.
I think we are no less than, like I'll often say in my yoga class, you are no less than for taking the easier option. You are all equally brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And you are where you are, and you've got to figure out, we all have to love ourselves in those moments,
Mm,
be where we are.
mm,
We have to be there. We can't pretend we're not there. But when we can be there and we can be in love and grace and compassion for ourselves in those places, that's,
yeah.
where we then get to come into a new,
Mm,
that compassion can follow and we can create something new. And I think moms are some of the worst about beating ourselves up and,
hmm. Yeah.
shaming ourselves. And I
Yeah.
mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so,
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful when we can come out of that and we can release the judgment, not just of others, but of ourselves and the
Hmm.
experiences and choices that we made. Because
Yeah.
we are all fucking doing the best we can. We really
Yes.
are,
Yeah.
especially for our children. And,
Yeah.
to even think otherwise is, negating so much of who we already know ourselves to be, and we still do it. And so
Yeah.
what I would love to hear, is like, if you could look back and you could talk to your younger self and you could give somebody, who's in the shit, whether they just had a traumatic birth, whether they're in a relationship, like, what would you tell them?
I would say you are stronger than you think. And even with tears streaming down your face and your heart genuinely aching, you have fire in your belly and you really, really are so incredibly strong. Yeah. Because I never imagined that I'd be able to survive what I've been through. At times, I haven't wanted to live because it's been so intense. But yeah, I would say you're a fucking goddess and don't be treated any less than.
A fucking men.
Yes.
A fucking men right there. Yes. That is the exactly the feeling that I want to remind all moms out there, that when it gets to the bottom of the barrel and you are at your worst feelings and you feel like rock bottom,
Mm,
there is still fire there. And using those feelings and being in those feelings can actually help be the catalyst to get you the hell out of there. And it can be
mm,
the biggest gift in your life. It doesn't feel like it
mm,
today. I promised you that. And when
mm-hmm.
somebody told me that I was going to be happy about this experience, I about sucked my mother when she said that to me.
Yes.
But the truth was, she wasn't wrong. It just was not the moment to tell me. But
Yeah.
the reality is that realistically, this world is full of our own co-creations, and our experiences are being formed for us. And I was using this analogy the other day. We're the race car driver, right? We're at the wheel, but we're not the ones building the racetrack. We just get to choose which fork in the road we take and
Yeah.
how fast do we go and whether we turn around, right? But life
Mm,
throws us loop-de-loops that we are not expecting. And there is
yes.
nothing we can do but hang
Yeah.
on and make the best decisions we can. And then we can look
Yeah.
back and go, holy shit, do you see what I just did? Right?
Mm,
That's the beauty of it all.
it
And
really is.
not blame ourselves for all of these pieces, and recognize that some higher version of ourselves created this so that we would learn and we would get to be where we are now with the beauty and
Mm,
awarenesses we have. But while we're in it, we have to love ourselves through it. And if we can't muster it ourselves, we have to find support and somebody who can help hold that space and remind us of the power
yeah.
that we have, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
listening to other people's stories, whether it's finding a therapist or a coach or a support person, doesn't matter.
Mm,
But
mm,
we deserve to be seen, every single one of us. We
mm-hmm.
deserve to be loved. We deserve to be understood. We are not
Mm.
alone in this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel like it's potentially powerful / useful to add that we touched on this when we spoke last week, but I think it's incredible when you realize that your instincts about your child are something to follow. So
Yeah.
something particularly that comes to mind for me was when Tilly's dad wanted to sleep train. And we tried for a small time, but I was sobbing in the other room, feeling genuinely unwell because I was hearing her cry. And I said, I can't do it. We're not doing it. And I feel like saying, needless to say, he got grumpy and said, "You can't persevere with anything, can you?" And I was like, "Fucking no." And I did actually, do you know what? I didn't say that. I didn't say that. That wasn't who I was back then. I kind of took it, but we didn't carry on. But it was breaking my fucking heart hearing her cry. And we couldn't. There's no judgment, of course, to others who sleep train. But that's just one of the instances where I'm really
Yeah.
fucking glad that I
Yeah.
pulled the plug and said, we're not doing this, because these instincts that we have, like it's again, it's that connection with our body to go, yes, that's great, fuck yes, fuck
Yes.
no, that kind of thing. That's so powerful to listen to. Yeah.
100%. And it's really strong with our kids. I
Yeah.
don't know a single mother out there who doesn't feel it at some point. And we may not
Mm.
listen to it all the time. We may give powers to doctors or teachers or
Mhm.
whatever. But
Mhm.
that intuitional, that connection to our kids is absolutely one of the strongest ones we have. And
Yeah.
there's countless times where I argued with doctors and people about what was
Yeah.
supposed to happen. And I'm like, you're wrong. I know that you went to school. I don't care. This is my kid, and I know. And
Yes.
you know,
I love that.
I got to be validated in the end because I did know my kid, and I did have a connection to them, and I did listen to my instincts, especially when it came to them. And thank
Mm.
fucking God I did, because it was my kids who highlighted how bad it was with my ex-husband. It was my kids who said the truth when I couldn't see it, and because it was them, I could not deny it. And
Yes.
when I could deny it for me. And so, my children are my biggest teachers, 100%. And I think
Yeah.
most moms would agree. And
Yeah. Yeah.
right, they
Yeah.
remind us about
Totally.
stuff all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And when they bring something to the surface, it's because I need to see it. And
Mm.
that's the beauty of this entangled relationship. And I find
Mm.
the more I take care of me, the better they are because of that entangled
Yeah.
relationship. The more I listen to my body about what they need, the better we
Yeah.
both. And
Yeah.
you know, this to me is the point of the motherhood portal and the motherhood experience, is to
Mm.
birth children and teach them what it is to be safe in ourselves and model that for them. And until they can create it themselves, they come to their mother. And it's
Mhm.
not to negate, present fathers by any means, but they're not the
Yeah.
ones the kids portal through.
Yeah.
And that first connection is always going to be to mom. And then in an ideal scenario, dad is there supporting the entire container. But
Mhm.
if not, at least those kids have a safe, supportive mom who can
Mhm.
hold them and teach them and love them no matter who they are, no matter what happens in their lives, gets to be
Mm.
their beautiful, unique selves and listen to their own damn bodies and their own
Yeah.
intuition and encourage that. Because to me, like, that's really how we change the world, is we help the moms raise present children. Because
Yeah. A
eventually
fucking
those children
man.
grow up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that you've just mentioned fathers there, or partners, because in no way would I want to squeeze a dad out of the picture, squeeze a
Yes.
partner out of the picture. They are obviously hugely important. And as you beautifully said, to hold the container overall, I
Yes.
envision if I was to have another baby, and I mean, my partner now is incredible, like just him really truly just witnessing us and helping with
Mhm.
what's needed and honoring what's going on. And
Mhm.
and I know, and I empathize again. I don't think there's enough sort of pre-birth child preparation for parents, dads. And I
No.
feel like, yeah, that's something that's obviously not for me, but just really precious work to help dads adjust to the change that it is and what their
Yes.
wife's going to go through. And that's why I love talking about matrescence, because it helps. When I've done talks, I've had couples there, and it's been lovely to have questions from the dads as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think, as you've said, the child portals through the woman, and it is incredible, and the connection there is so strong that it does not make sense to make sense to ignore it and to try and follow some fucking book or to try and do what someone else in the family has done before. Just listen to the woman in front of you and the
Yes.
child in front of you, because they are
Yes.
unique.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I've been, when I'm trying to unravel feminism and masculinism and all this nonsense in the world, I always reminded of nature and the way that other mammals work. And, the female lion, the lioness, she is the hunter. She is the protector. She, right, holds the cubs. She is far scarier. But
Yeah.
the lion prowls the pride and supports the entire container, right? And it's his job to keep the whole community safe, whatever that community is. And it's her job to focus on the cubs and the specific roles that she has, right? And so I feel like, for me, when I think about myself, that's the role I've always held. And I haven't always had the right person actually supporting the group, but me and my kids have always had our unit, and I've just picked up and moved to a different pride, right? That's fine. That's what we needed. But that connection, nobody gets between Mama Bear and her cubs. Nobody gets between Mama Lion and her cubs, right? And we are not that different. And I think that it's important to look at that and understand it in a different way, because that connection is there for a reason. And we are so pulled to protect our kids for a reason. We are so deeply in tune with their needs for a reason. You just have to be willing to listen, to open up to it, to stand up, to speak our truth, to advocate, and all of that. And I think it's beautiful that you've come through all of these big challenges and that you're using those experiences and helping people in the places that you were, as well as using your prior, knowledge to help support women and moms specifically, and the changes their bodies go through and all of the other things. And I think it's absolutely amazing. And I'm honored to get to know you more and hear more of your story. And if you have, if you want to share how people can get in touch with you, I will post your links in the show notes. If there's anything else you would like to share, please absolutely do.
Thank you so much. And just before I share bits about me, it's just so gorgeous to witness what you share about you and your family and you and your kids. So just, thank you for what you do. And it's so powerful. I love that this is called Awakened Motherhood, because, that's just it, isn't it? And I think, it's so gorgeous when you see a woman almost grow roots and feel stabilized, and then you see the fire in her belly, and then her stand taller because she's confident in who she is as a woman and a mother. Yeah. So people can find me on social media at Lucy Wylde Coaching. And my website is, at the moment, it's thebirthrecoverycoach.com, but it's soon transitioning to Lucy Wylde Coaching.
Okay.
So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And it was an honor to have you and to share your story of stepping into your power and everything that you have come through. I truly honored to know you and to share with you and to be on this journey with you. So thank you.
Amanda, I've got my hand on my heart, and I'm so, so grateful. Thank you to get to know you, to have this conversation, and for having me on your podcast. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.